Sometimes superhero looks become iconic for all the wrong reasons. Greetings comic lovers and welcome back to Casually Comics, the channel where we chat all things comics, from reviews of comics new and old to history to anecdotes, really wherever our whims take us. Supergirl's headband, it's a classic, a look that is brought up often as a throwaway joke or just to be on lists, worst costumes and the like. But just why did the headband come to be? Despite having a solid and ultimately iconic look, Supergirl's apparel went through a series of updates pre-crisis and well also post, but in the 70s she had a lot of costumes. We did a whole video on her shifting costumes. By her 80s series, The Daring New Adventures of Supergirl, or The New Daring Adventures of Supergirl, Daring was in the title, she had a new costume. It had settled down a bit. However, that changed in issue 13. There she got a brand new costume again. This one was more in line with her classic look and it took away the hot pants. Issue 13 also took the Daring off the title. I guess it's not Daring anymore, just plain old Supergirl. However, in issue 17 they also added a headband. As you can see here on this awkward, almost peekaboo cover. There was an entire in-story explanation for this. We've done an entire retrospective on her 80s series. In fact, we used to have a Supergirl playlist, so if you need more care in your life, I'll have cards and links for that. In this issue, her psych prof, who she was also working for, got kidnapped. This was because of a book he was writing on a prominent crime figure. A book that Kara, and her civilian identity as Linda Danvers, or Linda Lee Danvers for those who want to get technical, and because that comes to matter in the 90s, anyways, she was transcribing this book. So the gangsters want to kidnap her too. This led to a very convoluted plot where she had to pretend to be Supergirl, disguising herself as Linda to go and save her prof. During all this, he makes a comment of, "Wow, you two sure do look similar." She decides that means she needs to make her two personas more distinct from one another. It also means she stops wearing wigs. R.I.P. wig life. Instead, she gets a special comb that has these magic scientific molecules, and when she uses it, it changes the color and texture of her hair. So when she uses it, she gets a sweet blonde 80s perm. And then she also added a headband. Issue 18 went into even more details about the headband.
"But you're wonderful, Supergirl, and do let me add that I simply adore your new look. So chic, so with it, especially the headbands." I didn't exactly tell her the whole truth. I guess since only the males on Krypton wore the bands, but this is Earth, whatever. Traditional or not, I like the way I look these days.
So they went out of their way to justify this headband. But why was the shift made behind the scenes? Because there are actual reasons. This was less of an updating everything across the board costume-wise, which went on a bit in the 70s. Supergirl wasn't the only hero who got redesigned in that era. The entire Legion of Superheroes got new costumes, and some of them were quite questionable. The explanation for Kara's rotating costumes was that she had a superhero closet and she was cycling between them, which was basically an in-story way for the author and artist Mike Sekowsky to work through all of the different submissions, and just also the fact that he loved drawing outfits. Now this 80s change was a lot more corporate in nature, and it had to do with the hot mess, the beautiful disaster that was the Supergirl movie. I'm Sash, and I just realized I haven't introduced myself, and we're gonna take a look at some horizontal marketing, some brand tie-ins, some synergy gone wrong. So like and subscribe for more of that. Hot messes? Yes please. More please. The Supergirl movie was released in 1984 and starred Helen Slater as the title character. It is renowned for being a confusing and not overly well executed movie, but also highly entertaining in the right frame of mind.
You're gonna be all right. There's no broken bones.
I love you.
You could also make the argument, which I'm about to, that given how much of a mess some of Supergirl's stories were, for example, her little 70s series where she had a solo series in the 70s that only lasted for 10 issues, that was a mess. So in some ways this movie is accurately representative of how you can mess up Supergirl. She can be very confusing and go everywhere in tone. So well played. Unintentional, but well played. Now Supergirl was going to be made before the flop that was Superman 3. But after Superman 3 flopped, there was an extra emphasis placed on this movie. A really huge desire to make it succeed. Supergirl was actually supposed to feature in Superman 3 in a draft version that, oh, it sounds like a dumpster fire. You need to hear some of it. It was going to include such things as Supergirl falling in love with Superman. I don't think she was going to be his cousin in this version, but she was going to be found and raised by Brainiac, and he was also going to fall in love with her. All of it was going to have a climax that involved going back in time. So Superman, Supergirl, Lana, back in time fighting in medieval times against Brainiac. Beautiful. This got rejected, not for being a terrible idea that I still kind of want to watch, but because it was too complex, and also it was going to be too expensive. Logistics, stealing my potential joy. So we ended up with what Superman 3 actually was, which didn't do very well. Now enter Supergirl, who was going to reinvigorate the whole Superman film franchise, allegedly. The film had troubles with what it was going to be from the start. For example, Christopher Reeve pulled out, and he was supposed to be a key part in the plot, so they just had to rewrite everything. The new plot, not that other plot. It was going to be how she came and she saved him, and he mentored her, her and that kind of passing of the torch type deal, but then he backed out. It was a time, and I'm Cliff's noting it, but eventually it got on the road. And that meant stills and some promo tests and little snippets filmed here and there. It also meant costumes. Tests and costumes. In this process, there were numerous questions about how to present Supergirl. They wanted her to be relatable and hip, which is why they ended up redesigning the costume. The main costume matched the redesign from issue 13, as it appears there was a bit of a back and forth happening between some comic executives and the film. At least conversations were being had and attempts at synergy were being made. The idea that one could pick up the comic and go back and forth. It had been done before to really good effect, i.e. introducing Batgirl Barbara Gordon in the comic and the show at about the same time. Coordinated efforts. So it could be done. That was the hope for the costume. Well, the costume department for the film added a headband and permed her hair. Why? Because it was the 80s, and for a brief period that kind of fitness aerobics look was in. It's actually not quite as long as it appears looking back upon it. That happens with the fashion of decades. There are periods that kind of stand out, they're unique, and so they tend to be what's focused on. It's kind of like how when you see adaptations of the 90s, they'll focus a lot on grunge a lot of the time, or on the cute little plaid florally bit, to the exclusion of other things, or make it seem like it was bigger or went on for longer than it did. Also, executives trying to be hip with the youth tend to be behind the trends. That is unless you have a really good person on the ground who can actually anticipate what's going to happen, but that's hard to do. Not everyone can do that, and so it was that by the time they put the headband on, that trend was already kind of on the way out. That whole Jane Fonda, Olivia Newton-John, let's get physical thing. It was fading. Now, there are only a few rare shots of Helen Slater wearing it, even out there, but apparently when these shots were shown, it did not play well. So ultimately, not only was the headband removed, but they ended up going with the classic version of the costume. They made a couple little tweaks, like to the boots and the skirt, but overall, it was her classic look. And by this point, the comics, because of timelines and the like, had already implemented the new headband into the costume, and they made it a big deal by saying Kara was honoring her Kryptonian heritage and that she loved it. And then, even if they were gonna take it back off, the Supergirl series ended up getting cancelled and ended at issue 23. Well, I mean, I can't really say ended because there were so many plot threads left dangling. Sadness in my heart. I like that series. The Supergirl movie, even without headband, flopped. Some feel that its floppage factored into the decision to kill off Supergirl in Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985, though there are a lot of stories circulating about why she died. Basically, it boiled down to that they wanted to reinvigorate Superman, and the pitch that ended up going through was the back to basics type deal, and it was felt that he had too many supporting characters. They wanted to streamline the timelines, plus her flopping, plus dramatic character death. Crisis had a couple of those. Anyway, since that was her last costume, she was wearing that in the tie-ins to that event, anything that happened in between, and when she died. And when you wear a costume when you die, that kind of leaves an impression. So is the costume you come back in. I see you, Clark. The cover for issue 7 is a good one though, gotta give it that. And she goes down swinging, but her death would lead to some very convoluted things, especially when people tried to bring her back, despite the fact that they still had Power Girl in the new streamlined continuity. And Power Girl was an alternate universe Kara, so things got convoluted really quickly. No Crisis ever makes things completely clean, but they keep doing it. At the time of this recording, it's Infinite Frontier, and actually, I'm really enjoying that one. It's exciting. I'm excited. I'm part of the problem. Crisis, take my money. Now I feel shame. That's what the headband's for, the nervous sweat. It's funny, despite barely being used in the comics and not even appearing on screen, the headband has become low-key iconic. But not everyone was aware that it was a big deal, and let's be real, not everyone outside of the nerdier fandom circles is. Nerd and proud. For example, Helen Slater was unaware this even happened. It came up when she was doing an interview in 2019 about her experience being Supergirl. What she recalled of the costume experience in general was this: I remember they tried out a lot of different things. There were a lot of chefs in the kitchen because it wasn't just the Salkinds. I'm sure DC was part of it, the costume designer. When she was told what had happened, the comics had rushed to change the costume to line up and then had been blindsided when the movie's producers decided to ditch the look, she simply stated, "That's crazy." On the headband specifically, she does share the opinion of the fans who saw the promotional still. She described it as really wonky, but they were just saying at the other table that she was that way in the 80s. So yeah, that's why Supergirl has a headband. Behind the scenes minutia is wild. These tales have been floating around for years, but I always find them so fascinating. And not everybody knows them. Sometimes you hear things like, oh, everybody's heard that story, everybody who knows cares, but that's not true. You don't know what you don't know, and everybody's coming into fandom at different points or just at different interests, so you may not have heard certain stories that seem like they're just everywhere to somebody else. I know I'm always finding out new comic things or comic adjacent things, and when I do, I share them with you, or just the ones that I think might be interesting. I hope some of you found this interesting. Always a good day to talk about poor fashion and failed attempts to connect with the times. Let me know your favorite attempt to be hip gone wrong down below. How much do you wish we could go to an alternate universe where that other Superman 3 movie got made? Tell me things down below. While you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking this time out of your day spent discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it. I will see you again soon. Bye-bye. I have to sneeze, but I made it. Bye-bye.